This is it. This is episode 13, chapter 13 of our year-long Friday the 40th series, where we've been looking at the Friday the 13th franchise from beginning all the way to uh, space and Freddy versus Jason. Now we're into remake territory. We've officially come full circle. The franchise started in 1980, and the remake, which came out in 2009, begins in 1980 in that big flashback because they're redoing all the timelines. So I'm here once again with Lee Shoquist of Chicago Film and with Peter Bracke, the author of Crystal Lake Memories, The Complete History of Friday the 13th, which I didn't pull off my bookshelf. It's back there, I swear. I'm not going to reach because I'd make a really weird squeaking sound with the workout ball that I'm sitting on instead of a chair. But suffice it to say, it's still the Bible for this series. So thank you guys for joining us. Peter, you've been with us for the last several episodes, and we
Yeah.
really appreciate your insights and just hanging out and talking about these movies. We are in a completely different place, all of us, from when this whole thing started in January, which is a bit bonkers. So yeah, I I really appreciate this time, and we're going to talk about a movie that perhaps we'll just talk about other things. I don't know.
I'm calling from a socially. I feel like I'm in the woods. I'm kind of socially distancing, wait for Jason to come and get me. So I hope you enjoy the mood lighting.
Well, just, if you need to, every once in a while, just test to make sure that your car runs. So if someone does
Yes.
come after you, you're
Well,
not going.
well, of course, when I start running, I will trip and fall, like any good horror movie victim does. So let's see.
Um, let me start off by asking about, well, this is kind of different territory for us because we have been referencing Crystal Lake Memories, the book, and also the documentary that came out a few years later in the series. But for Friday the 13th, 2009, the book came out in '06, so this is a few years before it even existed. Now, there was a small portion towards the end of the documentary that talked about it, but I'm wondering, we're going to kind of lean on maybe some kind of cool insights or anecdotes or anything you want to share, Peter, about the remake that you may have done in some of your digging after the book came out, but when the remake came out. Anything that you might want to share, please jump in and spill the beans. Anything you might want to keep secret for an additional chapter of something coming out later, feel free to do that too. We're not looking to to spill any secrets you don't want shared.
No, it's so funny. Like when I did the book, I remember finishing it up and it's coming out. I'm going, you know what? They're going to remake this movie. I know it. It's going to happen. Um, and so now I'm like, I never should have put the word "the complete history of Friday the 13th" on the cover, but I mean, it was inevitable. We all knew it was going to happen eventually. So actually, I've done interviews with everyone involved with the movie, planning for a new chapter. There's some rights issues with Warner Brothers now, who owns the franchise here in the U.S., or I think they do with the lawsuit. In terms of, because New Line was bought by, or Warner, New Line was bought by Warner Brothers. I'll just say briefly that New Line's super cool, Warner Brothers not so much. So we have not been able to add a new chapter to the book because of photo clearance issues and other things. So, but I've done interviews with everyone. So everyone, all the cast, Marcus Nispel, Brad Fuller, Michael Bay. I'm ready to go and put a new thing out there. So we're talking about maybe doing an audiobook chapter or an ebook. It's just, I feel like fans would want like a new physical version. So actually, yeah, I've done tons of research. So got the full history of the remake. So I can actually ask pretty much any question that you would like about the remake. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, let me start off with this because I want to get the general feel in the room, or the virtual room anyway. Your feelings about the remake in 2009, because although it was a massive hit, I think it made 65 million in its total run, and according to Crystal Lake Memories, the documentary was the most successful of the franchise reboots that were all the rage back when it came out. It had something like an 80% drop from weekend number one to weekend number two.
Mhm.
People rushed out to see it. It's like, oh my God, a new Jason, and they're redoing it. It's the beginning of a new era. And then they're like, if this is the beginning of the new era, I am not so crazy about it. So what did you make of it? And also, in doing a documentary about, interviewing all the people associated with it, if you weren't crazy about it, was that a challenge at all in terms of talking about it with folks?
You actually know, like some of the most fun movies to talk about are the ones you don't like. It's actually hard to write about a good movie that is great. Like I wouldn't know what to say about Citizen Kane, for example, but I could write a book, about Mac and Me or some piece of shit, right? No, I'm just kidding. So, well, like honestly, like Halloween 3, I think would be really fun to write about. The first Halloween, so we talked about the death. Like, what are you gonna say, right? So, um, yeah, yeah, so no, it's not really a challenge. It's actually a lot of fun. And also there was some drama on the remake. And when there's drama, that's always fun to talk about. So yeah, that wasn't a problem. I mean, in terms of, actually, I'll let Lee answer first what he thought of the movie, actually. You go first, Lee.
Okay. Look, I've been complaining for the last 4 or 5 movies that they're all trying to go in a different direction, and the direction's always wrong, and it's not what anybody wants, and in the whole bit. And so here we have a movie that doesn't try to go in any different direction. It just tries to adhere to the basic standard formula. So that was okay. But I thought this movie was passably okay, because some of the things that have bothered me about the last several movies, meaning the weird detours into the supernatural and all the kind of stuff that we've talked about. I mean, the kind of ESP part of it. I mean, there's just all this crazy stuff that's happened. But this was just a stalk and slash movie to me, and I thought it was well produced. And I also thought that well, for the most part, I mean, I complained also that there was no suspense in some of these movies, that they were just, jumping out of the shadows, and in, 1.5 seconds, somebody would be killed. And so this movie restores the idea of sequence to the movie. So there's a suspense sequences in the movie that are built. So there's been work done in the movie, I think, to create some chases and elaborate sort of cat and mouse type stuff, and sequences that build in a way. So I think some of the things I have disliked in the latter movies have been restored in this movie, and which isn't to say I think it's a great movie or better than anything in the first 4 or 5 movies, really. But at least I sort of appreciated that it was trying to be a suspense movie in some ways, and I also thought that there is a criticism of these movies that we've talked about from number 5 on, where people just turn up in the movie only to be killed. I mean, it's the only reason that they turn up. They show up in the woods for one scene just to be killed. And this movie was not really about that either. So it was sort of there's a standard number of people, and it's a kind of a 1-by-1 sort of thing, a throwback thing. So I thought some of it was actually okay, and I think it's just doesn't do anything that's special, but it doesn't do anything that bad either.
Yeah.
And I also like some of the some of the touches, like the bag over the head, which I kind of like the return to that kind of look at certain points in the movie. And also I like the movement of Derek Mears in the role. So there was enough to keep me kind of interested in it, although I didn't think it was anything great, but it was certainly better than in my view, some of the more recent ones.
Totally fair. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yep.
And I share a lot of those sentiments. I'll let Peter go next, and then I'll talk about my evolving feelings on the movie over the years. But so yeah, Peter, what did you make of it?
I think you hit it right in the head, Lee, when you said, paraphrasing, it didn't do anything revolutionary, but it didn't do anything bad either. It's like it just kind of hit the basic beats of a basic Friday the 13th movie. I mean, I think for me, a couple issues were, one, the original movies kind of had a charm to them because they were new and fresh. You can't, the whole point of the original Friday the 13th, the first ones, it was all about the body count, right? Like that's how the movie was told. There was no Jason in the first movie. It was those flashing numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, all the creative deaths. By the time you get to 2009, we've seen creative deaths before, so just people being killed, it wasn't exciting in and of itself. And then the second thing, the characters. It was funny. Everyone to a T, I interviewed for the chapter in the book, were like, there was too much nudity. It was a mistake. We would not do that again. Because like it got to be ridiculous almost. Like all the characters were just kind of interchangeable blonde bimbos, kind of. The male characters were all kind of unpleasant. I don't know about you, but I didn't really care about anyone. I kind of like Jenna, the 2 leads were nice. But Amanda Rigogetti, she's stuck in the tunnels the whole movie, so she's kind of she's not really a final girl really, because she's kind of trapped, and then Jenna's kind of the final girl, but then she gets killed, so spoiler. So it's kind of like, and then you have Jerry Padalecki's like the final boy, so that was a little tough. And I guess the third thing was really, you know, by this point there was so much pressure for Jason to be this iconic star that, you know, like everything had to be a big moment. Like you think about part 3 when Jason gets his mask, you know, you never see it, he just walks out of the barn and he has a mask and shoots Vera. You know, it was like an afterthought. Now like they're trying to make this iconic moment where he gets the mask and like kind of shots he's like framed like this icon kind of thing. And so I don't know, but I mean Derek Mears is great, you know. It's just you know, Jason kind of has already, you know, he's become like an icon, so it kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't quite have the charm of the originals, but it's very well made. And yeah, that makes sense.
I want to build on something that you said a minute ago, which is, I think this is true when we begin to talk about the you know, the characters, we don't really care about them or whatever. So we get to a point in these movies where we accept that we don't care about the characters, so we start to look at the actors, and we're like, okay, well, I kind of like that actor because, you know, he's really cute, or like, you know, I can go with that because there's sort of nothing else there, or Danielle Panabaker, you know, she's nice to look at, so I'll take that, you know, so you just kind of take what you can get in the movie to attach yourself to it, because the movie's doesn't care, it's not doing any lifting with the characters. But I wanted to mention the nudity in the movie, which really struck me, and I thought, I mean, okay, this is a staple of the genre all the way to the, you know, to the origins of the genre, that there's scantily clad women and female nudity and so forth. But this movie really pushed it to the extreme. But I thought that some of it was sort of tongue in cheek. Like there's the scene with you know, where Travis Van Winkle he keeps commenting on her breasts and everything like that when they're in bed, and it's kind of a joke. And you know that they think it's kind of a joke, and the character is such a dick in the movie that it's just all like a big put on. But I thought it was pretty startling that the movie went with so much extended nudity. It's not just, you know, fleeting nudity like you know, Kirsten Baker and you know, Friday the 13th Part 2 getting in the lake in the middle of the night from a long shot. I mean, these are long close-ups, and it's always the women, of course, right? So it just it's out there.
Yeah, and everyone has such fake boobs. No offense to them, but like, do real teenage girls have those kind of boobs? I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe. I mean, there is a proud tradition of impressive natural assets in this series. I'm thinking of part 5. But okay, so, and something that struck me watching this movie this afternoon, this is a Michael, you know, it's Platinum Dunes, so Michael Bay's got his fingerprints all over this thing, and boy does it show. I specifically say that in regards to the nudity because I'm thinking of, this is like the Transformers era, you know, that all the controversy of like the camera going up Megan Fox's rear end and like in those first couple of movies. The opening camper scene in this like 24-minute pre-credits pre-title sequence, there's a scene where this one girl is pantomiming how hard she's gonna have sex with her boyfriend while a third party has his back turned to her. She's literally got her giant breasts out and is oiling them up with like baby oil or something. It's so ridiculous, but at the same time it's funny because I like that little interplay. It's very frat boy of the era, you know, humor throughout a lot of this stuff in terms of giving us characterization. Yeah, they're characters, but they're all really immature. They're all hornier than all the characters that have appeared in any of these movies combined. It's all over the top. And that's not necessarily a criticism on my part. I I enjoyed that. I've got problems. I enjoyed that whole scene with the camera and the bed later on. I'm like, because I thought, in not just the amount of flesh, but what they were showing, I was surprised that made it into an R-rated film. I was like, my God. But yeah, as far as my overall impression of the film, I wasn't that jazzed about it when I first saw it. I liked that it was a return to a lot of practical gore effects and yes, the nudity and the kind of the staples of the genre, but I fell into that camp of, this feels a lot like the Texas Chainsaw remake, you know, especially where they're making Jason into this they kind of did the same thing with Rambo in that last film, where he's got this elaborate series of underground tunnels, and that's how he can
Yes.
quote unquote teleport to different places in the camp. I'm like, you're really overthinking this, guys. Watching it today, I kind of appreciated that more, because this is not supposed to be the supernatural Jason. His origin still is goofy, because I guess his mom still thinks that he drowned, but he pops up at the camp to pick up her severed head, and he's like 10 years old. So I don't know what the timeline of this new mythology is, but it's like originally he drowned in 57. Mrs. Voorhees came back like 20 or 30 years later to, for that first film. So how long between the time that he drowned in this new timeline to her taking revenge? Because it seems like it would have been a week. Like, did she really snap and go crazy? I don't understand it at all. Fortunately, that's all relegated to the first 2 minutes, and they're not supposed to think about it again, really, except for the locket that keeps showing up. That's a weird detail. Like, hey, this looks like you. It looks like everybody, who's a woman, I guess.
Yeah.
I d- yeah, it's so messy, and for as much of it back to basics type of film as this is, they really do try and complicate things. We have a whole extended sequence in the lair with Amanda Righetti's character and Jason, and it reminds me of what Rob Zombie kind of did in his Halloween remake, trying to humanize Michael Myers with Scout Taylor Compton's character. uh, in addition to the fact this is Friday the 13th, the entire franchise on shuffle mode. And I think the filmmakers acknowledge they really wanted to go back to parts 1 through 4 and find out what made it work and really do that, except they literally took what worked. And it's the guy who's got the brother whose sister disappeared and was probably murdered, so he's going after. He's a survivalist type guy. A lot of the kills are kind of shuffled around and repeated in the motifs. It's just such a bizarre movie that I was kind of bummed when the movie was over. I was like, all right, this was not impressive, but I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel. Now, several years later, and the fact that there's still a lawsuit going on over the rights, so we don't know when we're going to get an official sequel, I'm kind of like, this is all right. This was kind of like 4 sequels of a remake rolled
Mhm.
into one movie.
Mhm.
Rant over.
I mean, it's like, I mean, when in doubt, go for the underground tunnel. I mean, we've seen it in so many movies. I mean, I was thinking about Mountaintop Motel Massacre, which is my favorite example of that. But I thought that was kind of curious. I mean, I don't know why Jason suddenly in this movie takes a kind of a hostage or a prisoner. I mean, I get it in the movie the way it's written and stuff, but it's just I guess that's the new twist in this movie. But I thought she was pretty good in it. And I think the thing we can say about this movie is that Marcus Nispel has done a pretty good job like shooting and cutting this movie.
Yes.
So to me, this movie never feels boring. I mean, it's obnoxious and the characters aren't people you want to hang out with really, but there's nothing boring about it. And I think the movie moves and it has a pretty good sense of humor, and it's certainly not in the the top 5, but it is it's better than some of the other ones. It's certainly better in my view than the Manhattan film, and others would disagree, but for me, it's better than the New Blood also. So I'll just say, I think this movie it moves. It's well paced. It's well cut. It's well shot, and it's overall there's a professionalism to it that's clear right at the beginning of the film, and there's some aesthetic direction behind it that's been given some kind of thought. And this is not in any way for me to suggest that I think it's in the top 10 movies of 2009 or otherwise. But hey, I mean, after some of the misery we've gone through, we'll take what we can get. So I think the movie has a little style to it.
Yeah.
That was something that I noticed too, particularly in the ski boat sequence, with Willa Ford kind of trailing behind, and then her boyfriend gets the arrow through the head. The boat kind of goes out of control and runs her over. There's a great shot where after she's been hit and she's kind of disoriented, we see the boat from her point of view kind of speeding away into the distance, and the camera is also half underwater, so we're sort of disoriented too. And I just kept wondering, like, where's that boat gonna go? Another movie would have shown it going and crashing into the shore and exploding or something, but it just kind of trails off into this dreamlike mystery state because we're as disoriented as this girl who's been slammed in the head. Now, one thing I was fascinated to find out was the original death scene for this character, this girl who's now out in the middle of the lake, and she sees Jason standing on the shore. in the cut that we got, the theatrical and also the killer cut as it's called, she goes, she swims underneath a dock and gets a machete through the head, which is a cool idea, but it's such a CG looking kind of a kill that I'm like, eh. The original death is conceived, I thought, was much more chilling, where Jason's standing there and he's just watching her tread water with this bleeding concussion. And then you cut back to the cabin, and then you cut back to the lake at several hours later, and it's getting dark out and she's still out there, but she's starting to slip because she's so petrified of going, getting out of the lake, that she just eventually drowns. I think that's one of the most creative ideas for a kill that we've seen in any of these movies.
Yeah. I think if I recall, there was some issues with that in terms of timing. To make that work, Jason then couldn't be anywhere else for that length of time, story wise. I think too, it maybe didn't have the big bang at the end as they wanted. Like they also reshot, you probably know, based on the deleted scenes, the Jason getting his mask. There's a different version of how he kills the guy he gets the mask from. So, and they also cut out a couple of things I actually like. Yeah. So, but that was all. There's a funny story that Ken Blackwell, the editor, told me. So people don't realize Platinum Dunes, as Michael Bay said, he's like, it's a Final Cut company, meaning Michael Bay, has Final Cut, not the studio, not the director. So Michael Bay comes down, sends the Ken. He's like, nah, it's too boring, too slow. Cut. He wanted fast. So there's a whole ending where after, right when it cuts back to daylight, after everything, and like now there's a couple shots where you kind of see trees and stuff. Originally that was much longer. Like it showed all the scenes like Halloween, the original Halloween, where it cuts to all the scenes where all the murders happened, and it built to the end of Jason coming out of the water, and Michael Bay's just like, boring, cut it. So there was some disagreement of people on pacing, and so I think that swimming scene was part of what got lost in the Michael Bayization of the movie.
Well, there in the killer cut, which I watched today, there is some of that. I don't know if this was put back in for that cut or not, because I don't remember the theatrical very well, but we do get a few of those scenes, and they are kind of quite beautiful. To what Lee was talking about of, Trent's house, the doors blown open, there's leaves, like almost nature reclaim it. You see some like blood on some of the walls. It's really eerie, and I think it is sort of betrayed by the ending that we get, because Jared Padalecki, I guess they drag Jason's body out to the lake. He kicks it overboard. They kick the mask in, they kick the locket in, and like 3 seconds later, Jason was he underwater grabbing the mask and like retying it on and then jumping up? Say what you want about the original from 1980. That was a dream sequence, but it's also one of the classic scares. If you're going to try and even approximate that, you either need to redo it exactly bit for bit with a girl in a rowboat, or try something completely different, in my opinion.
That's a really good contrast, because the original takes its time. People might say it's boring, but you see her, she wakes up in the canoe, the music, the cop walks, it's very slow and languid. And this movie, because everything happens so fast, you don't get the same shock, because there isn't that. That's one of the arguments, Marcus Nispel and Ken were making to Michael Bay was, slow it down. But some of that got lost, unfortunately. I don't know if you guys know, when I was doing research for the book, at its time, Armageddon had the most cuts of any movie in motion picture history, editing wise. So Michael Bay definitely, you watch like in Texas Chainsaw, that movie cuts so fast, the remake, it's hard to tell what's going on. Like you don't really get establishing shots. It's just in the camera. So Friday, I think, is a little better. It's a little calmer than even the Texas Chainsaw remake. But again, that might be, I'm an old fart, right? I don't know how you feel, Lee, but I like a little bit of the older pacing. But
yeah, me too. I mean, there's just something that seeped into the aesthetic of a lot of films of this time, and maybe that predated it by 7 or 8 years, where and you all know that we were using handheld cameras in commercial movies much more, and there was this kind of shaky cam feel to it, and if you look at this movie, also there's some kind of grungy rock music on it, and it's just sort of feels like it's a product kind of its time, and I prefer a little bit more, even for a slasher movie, a little bit more of kind of an elegant build to it in a way that Marcus Nispel is just sort of kind of a hard driving in terms of his style, that I would say, which is, I mean, that's a school of thought too, that you could just drill those shocks in as he does in a way. So I prefer something that's a little more atmospheric for me. But Peter, I wanted to ask you one of the kind of quintessential questions or reactions maybe in the book that you've written. In every recollection of each film that's been made, there's somebody, and usually more than one person, who has been in the film or has been involved in some meaningful capacity, that says the following. They always say, I never had seen any of those movies before. And I didn't really care about horror films, and I guess I didn't think anything of this franchise, and I just when I did it, and this always comes up where people try to disavow being in the film, or if the movie hasn't turned out to whatever artistic aspiration they thought it would, because they all sounded like they were enjoying it when they were making it. Suddenly there's a disavowal of it at some point. But when you talk to people about this movie, what was the general takeaway from people, particularly with respect to the fact that there was so much nudity in it, that it wasn't all that well received, that it didn't reinvent things, as it were. Were people disappointed about what happened with it? I mean, what was some of the reactions that people had to it?
Yeah. Well, it's different. So there, because I'm working on a new book about 90s and early 2000s horror, Scream and all that. There's a very big difference, because by 2009, pretty much all the no one was like, oh, I'm above this, or they were all, I mean, younger actors now are so much more self-aware. They know the business more. They understand social media. Genre movies by that point were pretty respectable. Even slasher movies like Scream and that kind of stuff, like those were legitimate movies. It wasn't like the old days where like Janine Taylor from the first movie was telling me, she did Friday the 13th, the original. She went back to New York, to do some plays, and like literally the directors wouldn't hire her because she had done Friday the 13th because it was pornographic, awful violent. She had to take it off her resume. Johnny Depp or Jamie Lee Curtis or Kevin Bacon was very rare. Now it's totally opposite. Yeah. TV stars, everyone wants to be in a horror movie. Everyone wants. I mean, Scream 2. I remember doing interviews that every young actor wanted to be in that movie.
And every actor was, I think, that
yeah,
was crazy.
So Friday, no one was like, oh, I didn't want to do it, or the nudity was a different story. One of the actresses, she's like, I'll talk to you, but I will not talk about the nudity. I would not answer any questions about it. The producers said it was so hard to negotiate contracts. I mean, it was down to like the second angles, what you could show, what you couldn't. So there's another story I'll reveal now. So the actress in the beginning, America Olivio, I believe her name is, who was in the tent. Mm-hmm. She was not the original actress. I hired a different actress. They're on the set. She's in her chair. She's like, I'm not doing the nudity now. I changed my mind. And Michael Bay literally came to set, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he's like, fire. She's like, I don't care. So they literally got America in like one day to do the nudity. It was like,
that sounds like a Danny Steinman move.
Yeah, it does. So, and everyone said it, so that's why I'm going to say it now. I mean, Michael Bay's not watching this, but I'll put it in the book because no one said it was off the record. So, but yeah, it's like she won't do nudity, she's gone. So it wasn't about artistic integrity. It was like, you gotta have the boobs. So, so that was a little different. But and most of the people had not seen all the Friday movies. They might have seen one or two. They knew what they were. But there wasn't a single person I talked to who was like a rabid fan. None of the actors were like, oh my God. They weren't like super excited, but no one was like, they're like, oh, I love horror movies. It's great. It's great to be part of Friday the 13th and this classic series. Obviously, I want to do other bigger things, but there was no shame that anyone had for this one. But again, 2009 is much different than 1982. So.
It's funny that Jared Padalecki was the lead in this movie, because this was like season 2 or 3 of the show Supernatural that he was doing. I think it was the first episode of that series was sort of a riff on Friday the 13th. There was like a little zombie boy in the lake, and it was very creepy and kind of effective. But actually about that, the first actress who was fired because she didn't do nudity, do you know if that was in the contract? Was it a surprise to her that it was being asked, or did she just change her mind?
Yeah, she changed her mind. It was contracted. Yeah, I mean, that's all. It was all worked out ahead of time. She just, at the moment, I can understand. I mean, I guess if you're an actress, and all of a sudden you have to go to set for all these people and you gotta do this. I mean,
Sure.
do you remember that scene? I mean, she's not just like a flash nudity. You remember she takes her boob out and she's doing this.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's like,
it's like strip club stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So, I don't know, what was going through, so yeah.
It's always funny though to think about though, you guys, because maybe it's a matter of the material. Because what I was watching, and Ian, you probably saw this too, Pieces of a Woman, recently, which is one of the big Oscar movies, and then Shia LaBeouf is in the movie, and he's got like a full frontal nudity in the movie, like twice in the film, and maybe it's different for men than it is for women, although I don't know. But it seems like if there's some kind of pedigree to the project, or it's more serious minded, or what the director has some reputation for being sensitive in some way, then actors will just do it. But when it's in a horror film where they're just being told take off your top, then it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, well, I understand it. I mean, well, also guys, it's different because usually it's not a guy throwing out his penis and like waving at the camera, you know what I mean? Like that scene in Friday the 13th, like there's no reason for that other than that show the girl's tits and have her be all stripper like you're a piece of meat at that point. It's very different than if Steven Spielberg comes and shows us and says, okay, you're going into this is Auschwitz and you're this is historical. It's just total. I don't know why that popped in my head, but
it's a different kind of camp,
totally
but we can leave that aside.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, totally.
No.
I mean, once serious, realistic, nudity is important. It's versus. I mean, this is total exploitation. I mean, even like no one involved with the movie says anything. I mean, like, yeah, it's purely to show boot. I mean, there's no artistic reason for these moments in the movie. So,
I was just thinking about that, like why someone would sign a contract and then kind of bow out when they got to set. I'm almost wondering, because it's such an outrageous scene, I'm wondering how much of that was like on the day of shooting, and maybe I'm just speculating, maybe this got carried over into what America was asked to do, but on the day, if the director or someone was like getting into a certain vibe about where the scene was going and said, well, it'd be great if you like took him out and kind of rubbed oil on him and played with them. Whereas in the script, it might've been like, Gina flashes a boob, behind the guy's back. And that's kind of it. An embellishment that the actress might have rightly said, I know what I signed on for, but I didn't really sign on for this.
Well, I have the original script, the very early version, so I should go back and check and see how it's described. That would be good. Before he's even shot, I have this.
I mean, I think that this topic would be really interesting for its own session, because if we were to think back across, if we would start with PJ Souls in Halloween, right? In the scene with the phone and so forth, and or the scene right before that. I wonder how integral, like if we really think about it, how integral nudity is to a successful slasher movie, because someone decided like very early on that was one of the staples of a slasher movie that you had to have, violent death, you had to have nudity, you had to have, final girl, whatever it was. But I wonder if in fact, like, nudity is integral to the success of a slasher movie, or if people are just sort of there for the kills, and if the nudity wasn't in the film, that these movies would have all been as successful as they were,
Yeah, I disagree. I agree. I don't think nudity is essential. I think if you look just factually, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street have very little. The first ones have very little nudity. You see a little bit of Jane Dean Taylor. You see a very second of PJ Souls. There's no nudity in Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven, you said after the earliest photo from Last House, he doesn't do nudity anymore. After Swamp Thing, actually, and and then you look at all the 90s stuff. I mean, Scream, I knew last summer. None of them have nudity. That was on purpose. Urban Legend, no nudity. The only ones that do are the ones that are trying to go, like the Rob Zombie's Halloween and Friday the 13th. They went the opposite direction. They're like, we're going full on grindhouse nudity. Even the Texas Chainsaw remake has no nudity. The original Texas Chainsaw, I don't think has any nudity. So most of the most successful horror slash movies of all time don't have nudity. Black Christmas doesn't.
Yeah, but if you go down into the bottom of the barrel, and you're always dealing with that when you look into movies like Don't Answer the Phone, or if you go a bit lower to the bottom, like I Spit on Your Grave or something, that's all that is, So it's just very interesting to look at the degrees of exploitation, I guess, versus non. But
I think that was the perception. Like you look at the difference between Halloween 2 and Halloween 1. Halloween 1, you have a little bit of PJ Souls. Halloween 2, you have the poor nurse in the hot tub getting pulled up and up with her tits flying out. It's just you don't need. I mean, you don't need that. It's not scary. I guess that's what fans want. But that assumes your fans are all young, straight, heterosexual boys who just want to see boobs. But as like Scream proven, this big subject of my book is, starting with Scream and those movies, like actually in the exit polls and the actual, data, more girls than boys when you see those movies. They were,
Wow.
So there's this assumption that slasher movies are only for young boys, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. So
Well, I wonder how much of that is because there's sort of different eras, because there's the 70s and 80s slasher, and then there's the reawakened meta slasher genre from the 90s and onward. I can definitely, it makes a lot of sense that there would be sort of that gender difference in terms of the audience. But as far as nudity, because it was in a lot of slasher movies, and as Lee kind of points to bottom of the barrel slashers, I wonder how much of that is an effect of there's sort of not necessarily a conscious formula, but just an effort to push everything as the sequels and the knockoffs go. Like, we had 10 kills in this movie, we have to have 13 in the next one. We had one boob in this one, we have to have 6 in the next. Just that kind of a thing. So it goes on, and then you start to associate this stuff with the genre. But then, as you're pointing out, Peter, you look at the staples, the ones that still stand tall. They really were tame in comparison, maybe even in terms of some of the violence. Friday the 13th, like the more iconic kills, I think, came later in the series when they were trying to outdo each other. Whereas in the first movie, a lot of stuff happens off screen. And it's not, a bunch of crazy guts dripping out and steaming. Actually, speaking of steaming, one thing I hadn't caught before watching it this afternoon, the scene where America falls out of the sleeping bag after having, it's another riff on a sleeping bag kill, but she's over a campfire. She falls out. When she falls to the ground, her eyes are open and there's smoke billowing out of her mouth. Do either of you know if that was a CGI effect or some kind of like practical wizardry? Because it looked damn convincing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I did not
No
ask
idea,
that question.
I mean, the thing about that moment is that it's hard to believe that she's dead, because 5 seconds before she's totally alive and she's screaming, and then suddenly the sleeping bag opens and she's dead. So like, where was the dying part? Because she seemed pretty normal. But
that was probably it. That was probably Michael Bay came in and cut like a minute out. Like, she's dying too quickly or too slowly.
Well, that was the whole torture porn era. Was they started to get that thing? Okay, how far can we go? Like Texas Chainsaw, the same way, Marcus. They all said, at a certain point, if you go too far, it just becomes unpleasant and turns the audience off. And they also knew that. So it's very funny when I interviewed the producers and the people who made it. I know last summer, the first movie they did exit. They did their data, and same with I still knew last summer, and they saw the different. They did 3 different cuts, previewed them. The more blood, the scores went up with the boys, down with the girls. So they had to figure out, okay, how much blood, because if you start going too much in that direction, you lose parts of your audience. So you can't go too brutal, because then it just becomes, I personally, like, I don't want to see people suffer, seeing people tortured, it becomes unpleasant, it's not fun anymore. So I think if we saw America Olivia burning to a crisp for 10 minutes screaming, it was already kind of unpleasant as it was, so I don't know about you guys, but
well, especially because sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I feel like you do too. I mean, sometimes there are these granddaddy movies of the genre, like Last House on the Left, for example, that are just, you can admire the fact that it's a well-made film in many regards, but it's painful to watch the movie. It's difficult to watch the movie. If you have any kind of a compassion for your fellow humans, it's difficult to watch a movie like that, because what Wes Craven pushes these girls through in the film, I mean, is in the hands of someone else, it would just be pure exploitation, but somehow it's artful quality about it that's hard to pinpoint, but the behavior is still the same. And so it's one of those feel bad movies. But I agree with you, the whole torture porn period, even if you go back and look at a movie I admire, that I like Hostel, for example. I mean, the extended moments of like body piercings in the movie, and in choppings, and the pain on the face of the actors. I mean, it's a lot to take.
Well, to give Wes Craven, we talked about that. I got to interview him before he passed away. He talked about it a lot. Is there is the one difference, like Last House and Hills, is back then, he's like, I was really serious, and I know it's a crude movie, but he's like, it was a protest film. Like, we were watching things going on in Vietnam, and they were whitewashing it, and then we start seeing real footage of bodies and people dying, and he's like, we wanted to make a movie that finally showed death is unpleasant. Like, the whole thing with the guts and showing the girls go through, it was like, we want to expose that, hey, this is what's going on in Vietnam, and people are hiding it and whitewashing it. It's not, the guy on the white horse comes and shoots the bad guy, bang, bang, you're dead. So, but without that political subtext, with the torture porn, it's just human pain and suffering. So at least Last House, it is an unpleasant movie, but at least there was a kernel of trying to do something with some meaning to it, whereas, anyone can show an eye popping out and people getting tortured, right? Like, I could do that. You're gonna get a reaction from another human being.
Yeah, once I want to tell a funny, quick Wes Craven story. I did an interview with him once, and I had a fellow journalist with me. We did two of us, 2-on-1 with Wes Craven, and so I, at that point, Deadly Blessing had never been released on DVD or Blu-ray. On Blu-ray, so I said, Wes, what's happening? Are we ever going to see a Deadly Blessing? And he said, oh, we're trying, and it would just be really great to have it on Blu-ray and so on and so forth, and with any luck, it's going to be coming soon. And then the other journalist said, well, are we ever going to see Deadly Friend? And then Wes said, I can imagine his reaction was, oh, please.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, I always thought that was really funny. So that'll forever color my feeling about Deadly Friend.
It's sort of like asking him, for a special edition of Vampire in Brooklyn. It's like,
I just can't get over that the two of the three of us have interviewed Wes Craven. That's man. Oh, that's awesome.
I actually apologize. You have to cut this out. My phone's about to die because I've been using up so much battery. So I don't know how much time.
Well, we're just about time, so I think I'm going to leave it with this question. In the movie, in the 2009 remake, there is an Officer Bracke, who I assume is based on you. But Jared Padalecki, I watched this bit twice. He referred to him as Officer Bracke. So did he mispronounce it, or have I been mispronouncing your name for like the last 4 months?
That is so funny you say that. So there's no way to say without sounding an asshole, but so the movie was in production. Mark Swift and Damian Shannon wrote it. They did Freddy versus Jason. I interviewed them for the book, and they were great. We keep in touch a little bit. So Mark Swift sent me the script early. I'm going to tell the story. He's like, oh, I was all excited to read it, and I'm reading. I'm like, oh my God, Officer! I couldn't believe it, and I wrote him. I said, thank you. This back an email. I can't believe it. He's like, oh, it was a little tribute. It's so great. And I see the movie Officer Bracke, and then I found out that because I interviewed Mark, and he's never said my last name. No one knew how to pronounce my last name, so that's how they pronounced it. So.
No, that's fine.
People don't know that. Yeah, most people don't know how to pronounce it. So, cool.
Okay, I'm relieved because that means that you haven't just been being polite this whole time as I've been butchering your name.
Most people say Bracke because it, Yeah, so I can't complain though. I'm very grateful to have that little, name thing. So yeah, awesome. I never had hard to tell them either. I never told them. So.
Well, you can send them this as a passive-aggressive thank you note. No.
No.
But
no. One thing is so funny. I've never issued. Even for the new book version, I never interviewed Richard Burgi, who played Officer Bracke. I always thought that'd be weird. Like, how do I write this guy and request an interview? Be like, he played me. You know what I mean? Like, that would be really weird. So hopefully someday I'll get to interview him. But we'll see.
Oh, I love that guy, especially because he was in Hostel 2, I think.
Yeah. Before. So I was just going to say that I thought Derek Mears was great in the film. I liked the ferocity of Jason. I thought it was cool. I thought the murders in the film were pretty cool. I love the hatchet in the back. I thought the bear trap was cool. There's a number of moments like that in the film where the killings are pretty novel and interesting. It's hard to find new ways to kill people at this point in the series, but they did at least with the bear trap in the film. And I liked Derek Mears. I thought his physicality was well used in the film.
Yeah. I do too. I really liked him as Jason. And just on a personal note, he was the first person to sign my hockey mask when I started doing the convention circuit years ago. So that was awesome. And he was so it's great to see a real Jason fan take on this role and just be so giddy. But I am going to wrap it up here because I know, Peter, your phone's dying. I'm about to go be on another podcast in mere minutes. So we're going to slash this episode. Thank you very much, guys. I can't believe we've talked about this for, Lee and I have talked about this for almost a year. Peter, you've been so great with your time. And I think we'll be talking some more in 2021 about perhaps some 90s and millennial slasher films, if you're game
I
for
gotta
it.
show you my toy. Look.
Oh,
Wow,
nice.
cool.
And we
Very
end
cool.
it with memorabilia. I love it. Okay,
Isn't
so
it-
all right, thanks guys. Have a great night, and we'll
too.
be talking more horror in the future. Take it easy.
Yes.
All
All right.
right, bye.
How you guys?